Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Mary Cosby. I'm a senior consultant with addins. And the webinar today is going to be around add-ins in AX 2012. It is new functionality in the 2012 version of Dynamics AX, and it allows you to really interface nicely and use the Microsoft Office tools, in particular Word and Excel, to help you use data in AX, whether it's reporting or generating like a Word template as a sales order, let's say, a confirmation to a customer, sales quotation, that type of thing. So it really gives you a lot more flexibility in the ability to use the data within AX. And it is a very user-friendly tool, I believe. There's not, if you use it straight out of the box, there's a lot of functionality that doesn't really require a lot of development type work or knowledge to be able to use this part of the functionality of AX. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Excel. It is a bi-directional tool so that you can not only pull data out of Excel, but you can also import data back into AX from Excel. And that kind of gives you two options, two potential uses, let's say. One is you've got someone who does a lot of data entry and they do it in Excel very quickly. You can use it for that. Or also, at the beginning of an implementation, it can be used for importing data into AX from an existing system, as long as you can get it into the correct format to be able to import it from Excel into AX. It's a very good tool for that. From a Word standpoint, you can set up some templates, and then you can easily pull your data in and filter it so that you're getting the correct information to, like, say, a sales order confirmation that you would then use to send to the customer. I'm just going to go through the slides real quick. There's not but a couple of them. There are some parameter setups. There's really actually only one, and it really just depends on whether you want to refresh the data or not. And it basically boils down to, do you have the add-in functionality or do you not? You can still use the Excel export as in previous versions, but the ability to use some of the functionality provided by the add-in is not going to be there. You can basically pull your data from AX into Excel, but you really can't do anything with it as far as adding data back in to go back into AX, that kind of thing. So I'll show you where this tool is. The default out of the standard AX box when you install AX is never. So if you're going to be using the add-in tools, you would want to change that to when possible, and I'll show you that in a second. From the Excel add-ins, what I want to do is kind of go through the process of doing an ad hoc report and show you a little bit of then, once I get it into Excel, how you can easily create a pivot table. And I'm not a pivot table master, but this is really easy to use this tool in Excel. And then the way you can use your standard Excel formatting within the Excel spreadsheet once you have your data in. We'll also be doing some importing using Excel. What we're going to do is actually take some data out, basically pull it out of AX into Excel, and then add a record, and then send it back into AX, which is what they call publish, so that you can easily see how easy it is to do that. Now, again, at the beginning of an implementation, if you have a clean database, and let's say you have a list of item groups that you want to load, it's very easy just to create your Excel spreadsheet with the data fields that you want to populate the Excel spreadsheet, and then publish it back into AX to create these tables. So again, it's a really good tool for importing data into AX at the beginning of an implementation. And then from Word, what we're going to do is just look at, I have a template document created. I'll just kind of walk through how that was created, and then some queries that are available. I did have to add a query, but again, I'll show you, and that's fairly easy. And then generating your merge document, which if you're familiar with Word, Word already has always had the merge functionality in it. So this is really just using that standard functionality within Word, but using the data from AX to populate the fields. And then at the end, if you have any questions, I'll open it up, but you can also jot down this email and send your questions to this email, and they'll get forwarded to me. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to go into an AX session, and I'm going to kind of walk through some of these examples or scenarios that I was just discussing in the opening. So the first thing I want to do is I want to pull in, basically, I'm going to do an ad hoc report. I'm going to use the opportunities module in the sales and marketing. So if I'm actually opening up for my main menu here, I'm going to go to all opportunities. Now, when I click my export to Excel, it's basically going to take the data that's in this grid here, and it's going to export that data to Excel. Now, one of the options is that if I have a filter on this, say I'm only showing the opportunities that are at 50%. Whatever the filter is on your AX data is what is going to export to Excel. So if you've got no filter whatsoever on your data, excuse me, it's going to pull every single, I think it's like 500 records in there right now. Or if you filter it within AX, again, the data that's going to go to Excel is the filtered data. So I'm going to turn this off, and I'm just going to click the Excel button. So we're going to export this to Excel. It's going to automatically launch a Microsoft Excel version. It's going to pull in the data fields that are shown here on the grid, and it's going to automatically pull in the data. Now, one of the reasons that it's, remember earlier I said that you had, there was a setting that you needed to set. So because you'll see if I go into Tools and Options here, oh great. Okay, well you can see it pulled the data in, but I lost my my session closed on me. Let me just open that back up here real quick. But we can go ahead to the Excel file because it's actually created my records for me here. So here I've created my records in Excel. These are the opportunities that I've pulled from AX. And what you'll see if the add-in is installed, you will see this tab up top called Dynamics AX. And this is the link between AX, obviously, and Excel. Now, some of the options that you have here are called a field chooser. You can do additional filtering on the table from here as far as the data that you're pulling in from Excel. And then refreshing basically gives you the ability to refresh your data from AX. So if you've got this Excel spreadsheet, you have it open, you know somebody's been working with it in AX, you want to see that updated data, then you could hit the refresh and it will actually update the records in the Excel format. One thing I told you I was going to show you though in the beginning was in the options, under Tools Options, this is the switch for whether or not, and it's going to be on the General tab and it's going to be in the Miscellaneous Fast tab. It's this right here. So the Workbook supports Fresh is either never, like I said, which is the default out of standard AX, or when possible. So if you do never, then the tabs that we're seeing here would not be available to you. These are the Microsoft add-in tabs. So because I actually have it set to when possible, the add-in is installed and I do have availability to these particular records. to be able to refresh and work as I want to. And okay, there we go. So we've got our records in AX and Excel now. Excuse me. And I'm just I'll leave that the way it is. Now, and I found that I'm missing a field that I want to put into this Excel spreadsheet from my opportunities table. So what you do is you use this field chooser, and let's say that the record that I want to put in is I want to put in my estimated revenue. So you can double click that and will automatically populate, it will automatically create the field in the Excel spreadsheet for population. Now you'll notice that the refresh all is not turned on. You have to close the field chooser first. It will clear the data, but don't freak out. You just hit the refresh and it goes back to AX, and now it refreshes my data and it pulls in the additional information that I wanted, in this case my estimated revenue. So from here, it is really just a standard AX form. So I can go into my Table Tools Design. I can summarize my data with a pivot table. I select my table arrange, and it's going to default into the tables that I'm working in. And then here is my form that I can now use to start creating my pivot table from my data that I've extracted from AX. So I'm going to, and it's as simple as, I'm going to use status as my report filter. I am going to use probability as my rows. And I'm going to use my estimated revenue, which is the field that we added, as a value. Simple pivot table, here's my information. Now from here, remember, I can now go in and I can edit this just as if it were a standard Excel file. Also, I can take and go into my options on my pivot table. I can create, where is it? Pivot chart very easily, very quickly, tell it what type of chart I want, and here I've got my pivot table. Very, very simple. Just again, it's functionality of using the pivot table functionality in Excel to basically, create the Excel additional information that you want off of the data that you have pulled from AX. Now, again, if someone's working in AX now, I've got this saved out on my desktop, I open it up, I refresh it, I'm going to get the refresh data because I've got my switch set to refresh on a regular, whenever I open up the form, it's going to refresh. Now, if I have this form here, this report that I want to send out to other users in the company, you can send this report to them. And your access within Excel, the data access within Excel that you're extracting from AX is based on your security in AX. So if you're assigned to a role in AX that does not allow you, in this case, to view opportunities, or let's say view the estimated value, you would not be able to extract that data from AX because your user is associated with that role, and therefore you cannot access the data if your security within AX has you restricted on that data. So just keep that in mind. It is security driven by the role security setup in AX. Okay, that's pretty much just the creating a quick ad hoc report using the AX data into Excel. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm not going to save it. And what I want to show you next is the ability within AX to have an Excel file where I'm updating the records in Excel. Again, this might be where you've got a high data entry, maybe a clerk who's doing a lot of data entry, and you want to use Excel for that input point and then import that record into, or those records into AX. But remember, it's also, again, I know I'll repeat myself, but it's also very useful when importing data during an AX implementation. So what I'm going to do going to save that. And I'm actually going to just open up a raw AX form, a raw Excel form. Now when you do this, what you're basically going to tell it is you're going to go into your Dynamics AX tab, and you're going to tell that you want to add tables. So this says, okay, what tables am I working with within AX? So you need to be familiar with the tables that you're working from. So in this particular case, I want to use I'm going to basically add a new customer from Excel and import it back into AX. So I know I need my DIR party table. I don't need the address table. The DIR party table has your name and your organization type, your type stored in it, and it's part of the whole global address book configuration, which I'm not going to go into. But you have to have, in order to create a customer, you would need to have this direct party table record would need to exist as well. So in this particular case, I'm going to use that table, and I want to add to my customer table. So I'm going to tell it, okay, those are the two that I want to use. And you notice that that at the bottom there was a checkbox to create a workbook. So it's actually going to create two workbooks for both the customer table and the DIR party table. Give that a second for that to load. When it loads, it's going to pull in automatically the fields that are required. So you'll notice that on my customer table and my DIR party table that there will be common fields, but those are the required fields that are needed when you actually create these Excel sheets when you're pulling in the data from AX. And there we go. So just like when we were working in the ad hoc report, there is still the field chooser. So what I want to do is, again, it's going to pull in my default fields. I'm going to go down to my customer table. That's the tab that I'm on. And I'm actually just going to add a field here. So again, it's going to come up with a default. And I just want to add the name to the customer record. Okay. Now I'm going to delete that row, delete this column, and I'm going to go to my DIR party, and I'm going to do the same thing. Okay, now, again, I've got my base data, and I want to basically just go in right now, and I want to refresh it. I want to see what data is out there already. So remember, the refresh all is not accessible as long as your field chooser is open. So we're going to close the field chooser, and then we're going to tell it to refresh. We're going to tell it to refresh all. So it's pulling all of my data from AX now. So you're going to see your DIR party record, and you're going to see your customers. So here are my tables in my DIR table, and here are all of my customers. Okay, so let's say I want to add a new customer. Well, I know from a logic standpoint that I have to have my direct party ID set up first before I can create my customer. That would be the normal process in AX, is that when you create a customer, it creates the DIR party. So the first thing we're going to do then is we're going to go in and we're going to populate, we're just going to add a record to our DIR party. We're just going to call it MC Company. And we're going to give it a ID of 9,000. And one of the nice things here is that, remember, you're interfaced into AX here. So I can actually look at my options through this drop-down and say, well, this is an organization. So the functionality within AX of using lookups and drop-downs exists in Excel too, based on those same tables in AX. So then for my customer table, I'm going to go in, I'm going to create a new customer. and I'm going to give him 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And again, I have a field lookup that again takes me back to my AX lookup values. My party ID that I had created was 9,000, and it was the MC company. Okay, so now I've created my record in cust table. So again, this is if I was adding new tables, new records into AX based on this table. So once I'm done with this, I can now go in here and tell it to publish my data. Now one thing to keep in mind, remember how I said logically in AX, you create a customer, but it actually creates that direct party table ID first, and then creates the customer record and associates the two together. So you need to be sure that when you're working with these tables and you're publishing back into AX, that the sequence that it does that update to AX is correct. You do that by, if you click this publish data and you select the options here, it will tell you what order of publishing is going to occur. Now in this particular case, it's wrong. So I know I need to move my cust table down so that I'm doing my DIR party table update first and then my customer table. So now I should be okay. I'm going to go in and publish, and it's actually creating these records in AX. Now when it's done with the publishing sequence, you will get a status form. It automatically will open up and it will tell you exactly whether or not your publishing to AX was successful or not. It will tell you how many records were published or how many records failed. So you know whether or not your document, whether or not your record is being updated into AX properly. So you can see from an overall standpoint, I'm completed and I had one record published. And I think I probably had that DIR party record already in there. So it created my customer table record. So if I go out of AX, if I go out of Excel now and I go into my customers and I look up that particular customer, there it is. So that's how easy it is. Again, once you get it set up in Excel, and you can save those files, again, so that all your setup is as it should be. You know you've tested it, you know you've done a couple of test versions, and you basically know that your format is correct, and if everything if nothing changes, then the data gets imported into AX the way you want it to go. So that is the an overview of importing data from Excel back into AX. Again, it's relatively simple. Okay, the other thing I wanted to just show you briefly was using the Word add-in, and the example I'm going to show you is a sales order that I want to do a confirmation, and I want to generate this as a Word document to the customer. So again, I'm going to go into sales and marketing, and I'm going to actually open up, I have a Word document, and again, using a Word template, I know that this document is always, it's always going to be formatted correctly in the same. So what you'll see here is I have a Word document. I've got my my field chooser field is open here, and I'm actually looking at both my sales order and my sales line queries. Now, I want to show you real quick where those are set up, because when I first went in, I had the sales order query was default in the system already, but I didn't have access to the lines, and I wanted to put the lines on the confirmation as well. So the query needs to exist, and that happens by doing the document data sources, and you can see that I have a query. Now, all I did for this was I basically told it I wanted a new query. I selected the sales orders from the drop-down. This was a data source where it was a query, and then you go in and you tell it what the data source name is. Now, this is similar to what I was saying earlier about knowing what your tables are that you're pulling into the Excel file when we were doing the import. It's the same thing here. You need to know what tables your data exists in. So I'm not going to say that. I'm going to delete that. And that's basically what it does. And it takes the standard query associated with that table and it then applies it to your field chooser. So what I did then is once I had these fields created, once I had the fields I wanted in my field chooser, like for instance the sales order, I pulled this from the header, and it's really just a matter of I've created a just standard Word document. This is just standard text on a Microsoft Word. I've put in my company logo. I've got the date so that it's automatically going to show my current date. And when you're adding records, let's say for instance I want to add a primary contact. I don't know if there is one on this record, but we'll just put it in here. So if I double click on this, that's not what I want it to do. So let's say I wanted to say primary contact. And when I click on this, wherever my cursor is, that's where it's going to pull in my, and this is basically, if you're familiar again with standard Microsoft Word, this is basically identifying with my merge field. So this is creating a link between my Word document and the data that it's going to pull from AX, sorry. So this is how you build the form. So you basically build your form this way. Now, when I did the lines here, as an example, I will insert another column here. So let's say on the line I wanted to put in, let's see what might be good. Let's use a discount percentage. Again, I don't know that there are any on this particular record. But what it's going to do is it's actually going to put that record here. If I add it to the top here as well, this becomes then a header line. So even though I'm using the same field in my field chooser on both lines, my top row is going to be my header row. So it's not going to update back to the, it's not going to put records in that header row, which makes sense. Now, one other thing that you can do here is you can add a filter so that when you're running the report, you get a specific order that you want to filter against. So I can easily put the filter, go into my filtered results. Come on. Try that again. There we go. And basically I'm saying from my data source here on my sales order, I want to pull this particular order. And I know I have one line on the sales order, so I tell it, okay, so I know I'm only going to get that record. So now if I click my merge document, it wants you to save the document. So we'll save our document again. And then we're going to click the merge. And what that does is it leaves my base document alone, and it will go out and create a new Word document with my merge information in it. Thinking about it. Okay, I used the wrong filter, but what you end up with then is I have a sales order with my customer name that I pulled in, my invoice account that I had on the record, as well as my line. And again, I just used the wrong, I should have used the sales line data source instead of the list, instead of the one that I used, and I would have gotten specific to that sales order and that particular item. We can try that again real quick so I can just review that and show you. If I go into my filter, we're going to use the sales line. We're going to add a condition where my sales order is SO 101291. Run my merge document again. It wants me to save it. Okay. And I'm going to take that out. I made a change. It always wants you to save it. Again, click my merge. Okay, so here we've got what you would normally see. I don't have a primary contact on this record. If I did, it would have shown up here. But the nice thing about this, again, is I can put regular text on here, which is really all of this information is, the primary contact, my sales order here, my logo. That's all just standard text in the Word document. And then you, again, use the field chooser to identify what you want to populate within those fields. And then again, now I can save this and put it off somewhere. But again, then I can use my filter as my tool to say, okay, I only want to print confirmations, based on a particular sales order. Maybe I only want to print ones that were created today. To give you almost like a batch job in creating your merge document. Again, within Word, just like within Excel, you can then have multiple. You can do your normal standard Word formatting. One note is this is actually just a table that I added. So all I did was just to make sure that you understand, I went into my tables and I added a 2x4. And that then I just used my records from my field chooser and put those into those boxes, and that's how I got my nice, neat listing from my sales order. And I'm not going to save that. Again, the only other thing I can think of is, again, on these document, not on that one, sorry, on my document type, this is where you can actually identify and document what your templates are. Now, I can't show you this completely through, but what that basically means is you see that I've got a sales order template set up here. What that means is that when I'm in my sales orders and I'm in AX, I'm not in Microsoft Word, and I go to my sales orders, then based on my record selected, I can actually generate the document based on the information from the selected record. So if you think of my sales order confirmation that I had open, that I was merging my data into as a confirmation, then basically this gives you the ability to have that template sitting out there in Word. You click this button and it will automatically, based on the record that I selected, it will generate that Word document directly from AX. So you're not having to jump back and forth between AX and the Word functionality to get these documents easily. You can just do it straight from AX. Okay, that pretty much concludes this session. Again, primarily just giving you an overview of some of the functionality that you can use on the add-ins. Remember, you can do the ad hoc reporting in Excel, and in Word you can do your merge documents, and also obviously in Excel you can use that to import any records. Okay, that ends this session. Thank you very much, and again, if you have any questions, you can send them to this email address here. Thank you.